been made possible in large part because of two key partnerships. Most notably, banquet sponsor Great Lakes Education Group. Great Lakes Education Group believes that... You're going to want to clap again, there's more about them. Great Lakes Education Group believes that students should be prepared to meet their educational needs as well as future challenges. Formerly known as Step Ahead Learning Center, Great Lakes Educational Group was founded in 2000 by Nora and Brenda Said Wright and is a resource for parents and students kindergarten through 12th grade, focusing on learning and logic skills required for kids and young adults to perform in school and ultimately to reach their potential. At this point, we will begin with dinner, and I would like to extend a special thank you to Angel Food Catering for the food we are about to receive. We will begin the awards portion of our presentation at 6:30 p.m., and you will be dismissed by table from Angel Food. So enjoy your meal. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go ahead and begin the awards part of the program. I know there are some of you that are still eating, and you can certainly continue to do that, but we want to go ahead and start with the awards part of the program. But before I do, I'd like to once again thank Angel Food Catering. Mike Maynard is also a 1977 grad of Saline High School, so thank you to Angel Food Catering for a wonderful meal. Prior to dinner, I mentioned that there were two key partnerships that have made this event possible, and we talked about Great Lakes Educational Group. It's also important that we mention Old National Bank. They are the sponsor of the actual Wall of Fame, and Scott Fosdick, Vice President and Community Banking Officer, is here tonight. Scott, I know I saw you earlier. Where'd you go? There he is, over there. So thank you, Scott and Old National Bank. It should be noted that Scott, Brenda, Mike are all Saline High School alums, and we'd like you to continue to support our business sponsors every opportunity you get. And now for the reason that you came here, the Hall of Fame. Approximately 3.5 years ago, the Foundation for Saline Area Schools Alumni Committee began discussing ways that we could honor those who have demonstrated outstanding individual ability, leadership, character, personal drive, integrity, and dedication. In short, we sought individuals whose lives and accomplishments inspired and impacted the students here in Saline and the Saline community. To be eligible, candidates had to meet one of three requirements: be a Saline High School graduate at least 5 years prior, a former faculty member, staff member, coach, or administrator, or an individual who's made outstanding contributions to the Saline community. When reviewing our nominees, we look for individuals who had gained recognition and prominence in their field or endeavor or made noteworthy contributions in community service. We look for people of high integrity and great character, and we look for people who exemplify the principles and the mission of the Saline Area School District as well as the Foundation for Saline Area Schools. Those not familiar with Saline might think finding individuals with those lofty credentials would be very difficult. However, over the last 3 years, we have 21 inductees, and those people include 2 individuals who are honored by their respective coaches associations as Hall of Famers. We have 10 who have served Saline Area Schools for more than 30 years. We have the owner of a business that was a fixture in Saline for years. We have the founder of an organization that's provided fresh drinking water to people that would not otherwise have it. We have not one but 2 world-renowned fiddlers and a Broadway actress. Needless to say, Saline is a special place where people from ordinary origins do extraordinary things. As we introduce our 3rd Hall of Fame class, I'm confident that you'll find these individuals more than deserving of the recognition they are receiving tonight. Each of our inductees was asked to select an individual to introduce them. So without further ado, I ask Brenda Said Wright to come forward and introduce our first inductee tonight, Audrey Barkle. Brenda.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by congratulating all of the inductees that are being inducted this evening. If there's one guaranteed fact about Hall of Fame inductees, it is that they have made an extraordinary impact on others. Mrs. Audrey Barkle has demonstrated excellence throughout her entire life and has provided her former students with a legacy of lifelong memories. Mrs. Barkle has been in a variety of classroom settings, both as a teacher and a student. She began her first 9 years of her education attending a one-room schoolhouse. In 1962, before she completed her bachelor's degree, she was asked to teach a first-second grade split in a two-room schoolhouse in Sparta, Michigan. In the years to come, she taught in Whitmore Lake and Brighton. She then began subbing in Saline, which led to being hired to teach elementary students in 1976. While teaching in Saline, she impacted the lives of thousands of students. I first knew I wanted to be a teacher when I was in her class. She made learning fun and taught us so much more than what was in the textbooks. She taught her students how to give back to others, how to act responsibly, and how to be a noble Samaritan. Mrs. Barkle did this through the experiences she provided for her students. When I was in 4th grade, it was my classmates' first experience with a special education student in a general education setting. This student had great difficulties to overcome, both socially and academically. Mrs. Barkle taught our class to treat all of our classmates fairly and with respect. This struggling student quickly became a valued member of our class, and still today I speak with her and consider her a friend, as do many of my classmates. A majority of her teaching career took place before the internet was used, yet she connected her students to the outside world on many occasions. Mrs. Barkle led thousands of students on the Saline Historical Tour, teaching students and families about the history of our great city while building Saline pride in students, knowledge and pride that we now share with our own children. During the holidays, her students celebrated Christmas around the world, which taught students to respect other cultures and traditions. Students researched how countries celebrated a holiday and would present this information to families during a celebration of diversity in the evening. When the state of Michigan celebrated its 150th birthday, her class celebrated this event by doing something for their school and planted a flower bed of flowers in front of Houghton School in the shape of the state of Michigan with the number 150 under it. When learning about the state of Michigan another year, her students biked the state. She had a stationary bike right in her classroom, and students rode the bike, tracked on the map where they were headed, and learned about the places they traveled through. While her son Damon served in the Navy in the Persian Gulf, all of Houghton School made cards and sent over treats for the crew on the Richmond K. Turner. In a thank you letter written directly to Mrs. Barkle, the ship chaplain noted, and I quote, "We are encouraged by your support, and I want to let you know you are having a major impact on our morale and welfare." An elementary school having a major impact on the morale and welfare of a crew in the Navy. I think this is simply remarkable. Mrs. Barkle continued to teach while fighting 2 bouts of cancer. During her second battle with cancer, I subbed in her classroom during her chemotherapy treatments. When I went in for the first day, I learned that even when she was ill, she was still spreading kindness and goodwill to others. You see, she read the story of Sadako and the 1,000 paper cranes to her students, which has a special significance. According to the Japanese legend of the crane, if a person who is ill folds 1,000 of the origami birds, the gods will grant his wish and make him well. Her class did fold 1,000 paper cranes with paper sent directly from Japan. The cranes were strung together and then delivered to the Cancer Care Center at St. Joseph Mercy Hospital, where they remain on display still today. Mrs. Barkle taught students how to be a good person who contributed positively to other classmates, to people outside of their classroom, and to civilization as a whole. She always put students first and always gave her students 110% while expecting nothing less from them. These high expectations stretched and motivated her students to reach their maximum potential. She went out of her way to reach each student and truly loved and cared for them. Her respect and passion for her students, for teaching, and for humanity are lessons that her students have carried with them well past Saline area schools and into adult life. It is with great honor and pleasure to introduce our next inductee into the Hall of Fame, Mrs. Audrey Barkle.
my speech will be shorter. Much shorter. Thank you very much, Brenda. As you know, an elementary teacher requires many helping hands to be successful. I would like to thank the students, my parents, my colleagues, especially those in my grade level, the entire staff, the administration for giving me an opportunity to teach in this great school district. Now I am deeply honored to be inducted into the Hall of Fame for the Saline area schools. Thank you to those that nominated me and the foundation of the Saline area schools for making this possible. I had a wonderful Friday evening last night. We were winners. And a very nice banquet tonight. Everything was great. But most of all, I want to thank you, family, for being there for me at all times, especially my husband. Thank you.
The Barkle family kind of owned the patio up there last night, so it was great to see everybody come back to town to celebrate Audrey's induction tonight. The second individual that we're going to recognize this evening is somebody that anybody who's been to an athletic event at Saline over the last several years would know. He's helped out taking tickets and also does a ton of work over at Weber Blessed, and so all those youngsters that come over there and get introduced to the one-room schoolhouse will know him as well. But to introduce James L. Heft is Christine Heft Lawyer and Scott Graydon.
Good evening. My Uncle Jim likes to say, everyone needs an Uncle Jim. And I'm inclined to agree with him. It's impossible to sum up a lifetime of good works in a few minutes, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to try. I'm one of his 10 nieces, and he also has 10 nephews. Almost every weekend as we were growing up, most or sometimes all of us would invade his private space at my grandparents' dairy farm on Klager Road. And many of the older boys spent the summers helping on the farm. Despite his many farm chores, university studies, and later his duties as a teacher, he always joyfully found time to spend with us. He's a big brother like no other. He taught us the art of losing gracefully as we spent countless hours trying to figure out how to beat him at Risk and Monopoly. Most of our efforts were futile, but we never tired of trying to reach that unattainable goal. He was truly interested in our lives, and he never seemed to tire of bragging about our accomplishments to each other. He was a positive role model, and I personally credit my decision to attend his alma mater. He made a difference in the lives of many people, as I'm sure you'll hear shortly, but what personally endears him to me is the following. He made our grandmother's life beautiful in her later years. My grandmother Haight had 8 sons, and she worked tirelessly aside my grandfather and uncles in building their dairy farm. It was a difficult life, and it was rare for her to find a time for other things, especially the finer things of life. Here's where my Uncle Jim excelled. His love of art, glass antiques, and fine furniture became my grandmother's as he slowly transformed the interior of her farmhouse, in our view, into an enviable showplace. Now, we had to be careful lest we break something precious. My grandmother never worried about such things, but if you know my Uncle Jim, I think we made him kind of nervous. It was a home for a queen that she so richly deserved. I know that you brought her much joy, Uncle Jim, and for that, I love you. Being true to his belief that everyone needs an Uncle Jim, he has enthusiastically enabled the Saline community and schools to experience his time, talents, and treasures. as his family, has done for so many years. Thank you for noticing and honoring him this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to help introduce Jim Heft for the Hall of Fame. Jim began his formal education in 1941, enrolling in Lincoln Consolidated Schools. As part of that, he benefited from the progressive practices and partnership that Lincoln Consolidated Schools had with Eastern Michigan University. He enjoyed busing, physical education class, assemblies, and a hot lunch program. They were all part of his education from kindergarten until 4th grade. His family moved to the farm out on Klager Road, and he began his 5th grade year attending Union School on Austin Road, one-room schoolhouse with 8 grades of students and 25 kids. Much different than his experience at Lincoln. He went on to attend, he received his 8th grade diploma and chose to attend Saline High School. The diploma at that time, you could attend any high school in the state of Michigan. And so he continued his education at Saline High School, attending Union School in downtown Saline. In 1954, he graduated from Saline High School and became the first member of his family to attend college. He attended Eastern Michigan University with a major pursued degree in history education and a minor in agricultural education. His professional career began in Onstead. He taught American history and 10th grade English, earning a whopping $60 a week. In doing so, after 3 years in Onstead, he was hired in Chelsea and spent the next 31 years teaching at Beach, where he was spent at Beach Junior High School, teaching English and social studies. He taught and focused on hands-on education. Today we call that project-based learning, and we've assembled the areas behind us for us to continue that practice. Very progressive at the time. In his final year, he was honored as the Exemplary Teacher Award for Chelsea Schools, a nomination that is prestigious, and it comes from teaching colleagues and marked the end of his career at Chelsea Schools. Along the way, in the 1970s, he moved into the city of Saline and purchased the Lambarth House at 322 North Ann Arbor Street. He spent the next 40-plus years restoring and preserving this historic home for he and Cheryl, along with the Saline community, to enjoy. In an era when all of the older homes were painted white, he researched and painted his house in authentic historic colors, the first on his street to do so, and many have since followed. His dedication to historic preservation has helped inspire the Saline Historic Commission and served as a model for others in our community. Jim has been active in the community in other ways as well. He's been an active member of the Saline Tax Board of Review, serving on it for 25 years, 23 as chairman. He has worked in city elections, was a member of the Saline Lions Club, and held all leadership positions, including president, in 1982 and 83, and was named Lion of the Year in 1986. He's been active in the St. Paul Community Church, or St. Paul United Church of Christ, and holding numerous leadership positions there as well, including congressional president. He's dedicated himself to the Saline area school community as well. He's the ticket taker for athletic events, as Mr. Ellis noted, for over 23 years, including earlier today down that hall for a volleyball event. He continues to serve the Saline community. He served on the Athletic Review Committee, community-wide planning. He's a member of the CARES Advisory Board since its inception, serving for over 14 years. In addition, he's a member of the treasurer of the Saline Area School Historic Preservation Foundation, which has raised over $150,000 in that time to support the one-room schoolhouse, an honor of which he received the George A. Anderson Vision Award in 2005. The participation has been meaningful for him in a lot of ways. It's also been an opportunity for him to serve as a schoolmaster for 3rd and 4th grade students as they reenact what it was like to attend a one-room schoolhouse, one very much like the one Jim attended out on Austin Road years before. Albert Einstein is credited with saying, "Only a life lived in service to others is a life worthwhile." Jim is living a very worthwhile life. I am proud to introduce James L. Heft for induction into the Foundation for Saline Area Schools Hall of Fame. Jim?
Thank you, Scott and Chris. Thank you also to the Alumni Committee for allowing me to have this honor. Congratulations to all this year's winners in the Hall of Fame. A special congratulations to Howard Hill, who was our class sponsor and taught me bookkeeping skills and how to type. Good evening. I had a dream for my life, like so many other people. Martin Luther King had a dream, as did a 12-year-old child as he watched Neil Armstrong via TV walk on the moon. He said to his dad, "Someday I'd like to be an astronaut." His dad wrapped his arms around him and said, "Son, this is America. You can be anything you want to be." And today, he is just that, a well-known astronaut. Behind one's success, there are always others who have helped make it so. It could be a parent, friend, or educator. This evening, I would like to share with you 3 people that have helped me be successful. Lois Sebastian was my high school science teacher, and in my senior year, she became the first counselor for Saline area schools. At the beginning of my senior year, she gave us all various tests to find out our abilities and some of our weaknesses, and then met with each of us to discuss the results. She asked if I planned to attend college. I said that I hadn't taken some required classes. She replied, "We'll talk to the teachers involved and ask if you can take them this year." So I was able to meet the qualifications for college entrance and received a small scholarship. When classmates were making plans for our 50th class reunion, I told how Lois Sebastian changed my life. Frida said she had done the same for her. Frida became a teacher and taught on military bases all over the world. Our graduating class of 24, 25% of those people chose the teaching profession, and in no small way due to the influence of our counselor. The second person is my mother. I tell the students who visit the Bliss Schoolhouse that if they remember nothing else from their experience, it is that growing up 75 to 100 years ago was very different and for some very challenging. My parents were all German immigrants, arriving here without money, not being able to speak the language. It was the time of no welfare, health insurance, Social Security, and few workers received pensions when they retired. My mother had a beautiful voice. Her school principal, as was often the case, came to my grandfather's house to tell him he knew a man who would pay for her voice lessons. Grandfather said no. She must go to work. We need the money. I'm sure Mother must have thought of this life-changing decision when I told her I wanted to go to college and become a teacher. She did everything to help make my dream a reality. Her unselfish dedication to family, encouragement, and wise judgment were her contributions to my success. My wife Cheryl has greatly influenced me in our community service and volunteerism. After marriage, I became involved with her students in FHA, helping prepare members for state and national competitions. Cheryl's students became my pride as well as hers. Together, we continue to be the teachers of other people's children. Her great passion and faithfulness to her commitments and courage to accept new challenges and opportunities have inspired me in my community service. and have carried us now into retirement. I'm hoping I've got all my pages here. Yes, I do. Okay. An example of her ability is the growth of the Saline Craft Show. The craft show began as a way to help students defray costs for attending FHA conferences. The first show, over 30 years ago, had 60 crafters. Last November's show had over 250 juried crafters from 14 states, thousands of shoppers, and grossed a profit over $100,000, all profits benefiting Saline students. I told Cheryl when I retire, I wanted a one-room schoolhouse in my backyard so students could experience education at an earlier time. Superintendent Ellen Ewing asked us to be members of a committee to preserve Saline Schools memorabilia. At this time, the Milton Wiedemeyer family offered us the Bliss one-room schoolhouse that was located on their farm. It was being used as an implement shed. For me, this was a dream coming true. For Cheryl, more like a nightmare. The committee accepted the challenge and plans were made to move and restore the building. In my retirement years, I wanted to continue to have a purpose-driven life, to have it more than ARP membership and searching for senior discounts. Regardless of our period in life, we all have a role to play. After sharing the news of my 80th birthday with a neighbor who's in her 90s, she simply replied, "Jim, I'd like to be 80 again." She inspired me to keep dreaming. Since the Mustangs were first manufactured in the early 1960s, I have wanted one. A red Mustang convertible. Hint, hint, Cheryl. Throughout the years, I have learned that there are seasons in one's life, seasons of planting, and I am thankful tonight that I am experiencing the season of harvest. Thank you.
As I heard Jim talk about the potential nightmare for Cheryl of the one-room schoolhouse, I thought back to the chicken broil. There's a few of us in here that singed a few arm hairs at that thing back in the day. So, the third inductee we have here tonight is Lynn Coughlin, and Lynn is going to her award's going to be accepted by her husband Brian, and Brian's going to be introduced by their son Michael. You know, Brenda said earlier that she was inspired to teach from being in Audrey Barkle's classroom, and I know that there were a number of students through the district who were inspired to become teachers because of their experience in Lynn's classroom as well, and I'm confident saying that because I'm the father of one of those students. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Michael Coughlin to introduce his father, Brian.
Good evening. I looked at my clock on the way up, and I know how Mr. Ellis is about time, so I'll pick it up for him a little bit. But so tonight I'm here representing the honor for my mother. You know, when my parents moved here from Baltimore, we couldn't even have dreamed how great of a community Saline is. The people, the school district, and it's been an amazing place to grow up. I love it here. My mother taught for Saline for almost 20 years and loved every year of it. So over the years, Mom was always active. Whether it was school plays, I can still hear those songs in my head. I know, Steve, you can. You sat in the back room and watched a lot of those with me over the years. She also did take a veteran to school day. During that as well, my brother, who's here tonight, is an officer in the Navy, and on his deployment of submarines, she always had her students write them letters on their deployment. They also did fundraising, whether it was shoes or used books, canned goods, whatever they could do to help out other kids. Outside of school, my mother, it was for my brother and I, whether it was being at every single sporting event, taking us to even teaching up at St. Andrew's Catholic Church, also doing horses with us every night that we could. Later on, she was very active in the Relay for Life here in town. Her last year raising a little over $9,000, and this year in her honor we raised over $14,000. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Steve Lodge and Scott Graydon. We had a long, hard 8 years, and I thank you both. I know Mom is with us.
Hi, good evening. My name is Brian Coughlin, and for almost 33 years I was Lynn's husband. And actually, as you can well imagine, still feel that I am Lynn's husband. In Saline, actually, I'm better known as Lynn's husband, which I'm actually very proud of and certainly continue today. It's always kind of hard to accept an award on behalf of somebody else because I don't have all of the stories, so what I thought I'd do is kind of go over a couple of them with you. Lynn and I actually started dating in 1981 in December, which was actually a very good thing, except it was really kind of funny. When she went to the University of Maryland in probably 79, she was actually looking to be a nurse in the pediatric ward. And for those of you that were around in 1979, and for those of you who can remember, there were actually want ads in newspapers. You could open the Baltimore Sun where we were from and you could just see pages of ads for nurses. You'd open that same paper and there may be one ad for a school teacher. I can be here to tell you today that I thought Lynn's father was going to kill her when she actually called up because she wouldn't do it live and said she wanted to be a teacher and not actually a nurse. And after having been with her for 33 years, I really can understand why. Because to Lynn, teaching was not a job. To Lynn, teaching was actually not even a career. To Lynn, teaching actually was her calling. And I think fortunate for some, probably unfortunate for a lot of us, I'm not so sure we would look back on our professional side and say we actually had a calling. And I really do believe that Lynn's time in Saline, particularly in Saline, really was her calling to do in life. I'll give you one other idea. When Lynn was asked often, or when we were asked as a couple, how many kids do we have? It was easy for me, right? Right, I'm gonna count and I got it. I got 2, Patrick and Michael. Lynn often was confused. Well, I got Patrick, I got Michael, I got Sarah in 3rd grade, I got, she would just keep on going on. And I think she really just made a conscious decision that as a teacher it was contagious. I think it was contagious for a lot of the other teachers. It was certainly contagious for her students. It was contagious for me for the hundreds of papers that I actually graded. And it certainly was for everyone that she touched. Unfortunately, as most of you know, we lost Lynn in January of this year. And one of the last things that she did before she retired in March of the previous years was actually one of her plays. And that probably meant more to her than anything. So it was just a great, if you would say want to have an exit strategy, it worked out very, very well. Before I finish, I want to take this opportunity, particularly in public. When you go through fights that Lynn went through for almost 8 years, there's a lot of people who want to be in the know. You know, that's really nice. But then you find a group of family and friends that want to be in the know because they want to be in the know so they can help you. And I just want to thank all the people that came out tonight, particularly on Lynn's behalf. We have tables 11, 12, and part of 13 that really represent really what Lynn was all about, right? Not only great family and friends, but also the commitment that she made as a school teacher. So I know that Lynn would want to congratulate all of the inductees tonight, and certainly all the inductees over the last 3 years. And as her husband, I want to thank everyone here tonight for this honor, and certainly do accept it on her behalf. Thank you very much.
The fourth inductee here this evening is the longest employed Saline Area Schools employee that's being honored this year, and that is Howard Hill. And Howard is going to be introduced by his daughter, Christine.
Hi, I'm Christine, Howard Hill's daughter. No, really, that's how I've introduced myself for like 45 years. To anyone I met who lived in Saline, worked in Saline, that I bumped into in the grocery store. Hi, I'm Christine, Howard Hill's daughter. Because you see, I figured out at a really young age that being Howard Hill's daughter was something to be totally proud of. And I knew that I always wanted to be associated with him. So, I also found that I heard great stories. Because the minute I said, I'm Howard Hill's daughter, I got this. Wow, he was my teacher. You know, way back, he taught me bookkeeping and typing, and I never would have had the career I had if it weren't for him. And then I'd hear, you know, Mr. Hill was my principal. He was fair, but he was tough. But do tell him I said hi, because I was in trouble a lot. And I spent a lot of hours in his office, so please tell him I said hi. And then sometimes I'd get, you know, when I was a little kid, I missed the bus one day. And I was scared, and all the buses had left, and I went to the principal's office, and all of a sudden, this man pulled up in a car. And he was nice to me, and he drove me home. So I'd get great stories. And then my favorite one was one a friend of mine just recently told me over dinner. He said to me, you know, Christine, I knew your dad before I knew you. And I thought, I don't think so. And he says, no, really. I transferred to Saline when I was 15. And I had my first day of school at Saline High School, and that was, you know, what we call the Saline High School. And he said, I got lost all day long. I couldn't find my way around. I came from a much smaller school. I had all these teachers. I didn't know. It was just a horrible day. And then I walked out, and all those buses are lined up in front of the school to take us home. And I realized I didn't know my bus number. He says, and then I looked around and I saw this guy, and he was out there, and he seemed to be talking to the other bus drivers, and he was talking to students, and he looked like a nice guy. He seemed to be in charge. So I asked him, I don't know my bus number. And all Dad said was, well, do you know your address? And he says, yeah, I remember that. And he gave it, and he said, that man walked me right to the bus, introduced me to the bus driver, and got me on the bus. He says, that made what was really a horrible first day of school turn out well. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And so the last one I had was, a couple of different people have told me this one, and I hear it over and over again. They'll say, I drove bus for your dad back in the 70s. And your dad was a great boss. He says, you know, your mom and him, they used to make this end of the school brunch, like after the school run at the end of the school day, in your garage at your house, and your mom and dad were nothing but gracious and kind. So I loved hearing those stories, so it was worth it for me to say, hi, I'm Christine, Howard Hill's daughter. Because beginning in 1951, all the way through 1988, my dad wore a lot of different hats for Saline area schools. He was a teacher, he was a coach, he was assistant principal, he was athletic director, he was a high school principal, he was assistant superintendent for business and transportation. He was even the interim superintendent during 2 different transition times. But he was more of a behind the scenes guy. He was not looking for accolades. He was not looking for attaboys. He was just the guy out there making sure that it all got done. He was the guy that drove out onto the worst roads in this school district at 3:30 in the morning during snowstorms to make sure that those roads were safe for our kids to go to school and that the buses could safely get to school. This was before Doppler. This was way before social media. So just let it be known that during the blizzard of 1978, we remember the blizzard in 1978, one day we received 125 phone calls to our home phone, you know, that one that was attached to the wall, asking if there was school the next day. That's how news got around back then. And I know it was 125 calls because as a resident teenager, my job to answer them. So, you know, that's the way it was. Now, most importantly, though, what I want you to know is that he made sure that this school system ran smoothly and on budget. He oversaw every expenditure from paper clips to books, right to the entire payroll for the school system. He worked closely with the city on the millages. He worked with the union, the school board, the teacher negotiations, and anything that was financially driven in the school system. And all this he did efficiently, with great integrity, conscientiously, and without fanfare. And so now I am pleased to finally introduce you to an amazingly talented man, loyal and honorable, my dad, Howard Hill. I'm just making sure this doesn't move.
He says nothing to.
It's heavy.
Not used to making any speeches. I used to tell the teachers, I only know 2 words, no and no. And there's not much you can make a speech out of that. And so I thought about it, and my daughter comes up in here, and she already used most of the stuff that I was going to talk about. So I think what I'll do is look back a little bit, maybe somewhat the same stuff she said, but maybe in a different manner. I did come here in 1951, all of 25 years age. After 37 years, I retired. In that period of time, I go back and I look back at what Saline was when I came here in 1951. Some of you people do know what was here. There was one building, K through 12, basically with Saline students in town. That's all it was. It wasn't Saline area schools, it was Saline. And it's what we call Union School, which is up on about a block away from the main drag on North Ann Arbor. The next, I kind of lost my place, Christine. Oh yeah, I was going to go back and check that building that we had at school, what was Saline, was the Union, called Union School. It's probably half the building it is now. We'd added to it, went on to it, and we went to there, and it's very difficult to decide what is going to be done after that. And I look back at that, and I see here what has come from that thing. After all these years, it's just one little building. Now it's Saline Area Schools. You look around, and it's not anything you can imagine. It's the people that weren't here at that time can't imagine what it would be like now. And it's a testament to the people here in Saline and the people around. And we basically all the places out of town, out of city of Saline, basically were farmers. There weren't very many other activities there. Now, as the time went by, the subdivisions came in, and it's an entirely different animal as it was then. And I think if you look back, anyone that has been here, I have to say that wasn't in the actual teaching affairs for a period of time after 10 years after I came to the job that I actually spent 22 years in of being business manager and trying to get the money and get to build the buildings through. With that one building, we now look at all of the buildings that we have at present time. So I feel that somehow or other in that 22 years that I spent looking and attempting to make speeches with using that same word, no, it tried to improve what we have. I'm pleased that we're here tonight. I'm thanking you for accepting it. Makes me feel good that after 37 years, somebody has actually might appreciate what I spent for that 37 years. Thank you.
We are going to take a short 10-minute break to go ahead and allow you the opportunity to get dessert. We're not going to dismiss you by table for that, so go ahead and head on over there and grab some dessert, and then we will start again at 7:35. As we get ready to start the last three inductions here tonight, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the previous 14 Hall of Fame members who were introduced the previous 2 years. And so a number of them are here tonight. Actually, I think 11 of the 14 are here tonight. So as I call your name, please stand so we can recognize you as well. From our first Hall of Fame class, right here at the front table, Clem Corona. Actually, these are alphabetical, so Clem Corona, Jack Crabtree, Carly Green, Cheryl Heft, Taylor Jacobson, Jim Lesher, Bryn O'Malley, Roy Palmieri, Kay Raymond, Bonnie Rideout, Jesse Stevenson, Paul Tebow, Kim Van Hoek, and Marlene Weintraub. We'll have to figure out a different way to do that next year with 21 people. The fifth individual we're going to introduce to you here tonight is actually kind of a neat one for me on a personal level. My senior year in high school, I was coached by this individual's father. He was a football coach and assistant for us, and he left football camp that year to go home and be with his wife as they welcome their second son into the world. And so since that time, we've kind of kept in touch and watched Bradley grow and develop and just do amazing things in the world of music. And so it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Dave Phillips, who's going to introduce his son, Bradley.
Thank you, Kurt. Good evening, everybody, and congratulations to all the inductees. It's quite an honor. In fact, when Denise and I found out that Brad was going to be inducted, and Kurt and David Raff talked to us, we were pretty, taken back by the whole thing. Because if you just look at the names that Kurt just read and you find out your kid's going to join them as in a common hall, that's a pretty special thing. I remember that day, Kurt, very well. We were actually in the process of moving from Clinton to Saline for good reasons. And we actually, in between, I think it was our picture day and I think our inter-squad scrimmage, all the coaches got together and packed up our stuff in Clinton and moved the stuff here in Saline where I still reside, and Brad came home to a new house. And so the rest is kind of history from there. But the goal was at that point in time, of course, is to get our kids into Saline schools. And, even before I came to Saline, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit, the reputation was, already out to where I was in the Detroit area, but what a fine system this was. So how we got here is really I kind of narrowed it down to about 3 different things. Is one, would you call good stock? I'm not going to take any credit in that. Fate, and some qualities that Kurt talked about that are kind of related, commitment and hard work. The good stock comes from, of course, that while I was busy coaching and teaching and trying to get my career started, Brad's mom and Brian's mom, Denise, was at home raising these guys. And, if there's one thing that we're proud of more than anything else in these guys, is not necessarily the careers that they chose, which we are very proud of course, but is the people that they turned out to be. And so we thought that when I heard that, when Kurt mentioned the other qualities that the inductees needed to be, I felt really good about that. And I really have to turn that over to their mom because she insisted on it. So it was, I have to hand that over to her. The other piece is fate. About 39 years ago, on Labor Day weekend, I got a call from a gentleman by the name of Paul Tebow, who came over my phone and said, "I'm looking for Dave Phillips." I wasn't sure whether I was going to admit it was him or not, And I said, "Well, this is Dave." And he's, "Paul Tebow, Saline High School principal. We're looking for a distributive education teacher. Are you interested?" And I said, well, I was teaching at Bishop Foley at that time for about 3 weeks. And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm interested." "Well, come on down sometime. We'd like to talk to you." Well, one of the smartest things I ever did, of course, is I took a personal day a day later that week, and I came and talked to Paul, and things kind of worked out. The other part of my experience here of teaching was also coaching, which is something that, further developed me as into some of the things I do today. But it didn't start out really well, and not many people know this, because one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to coach, because I had already done it for 5 years while I was in college. And so on my second day of employment, I went down to the main office, and mine was down by the counseling office there. And I saw the door to Mr. Corona's office, halfway open, and he was just kind of sitting there like this. And I go, "Oh, good, he's not busy." So I just kind of pushed the door open, and I said, "Hi, Mr. Corona, I'm Dave Phillips. I'd like to coach someday." And he just kind of glared at me, and he goes, "Can't you see I'm speaking to somebody?" And there's a kid on the other side, of course, getting some wisdom from Clem. And I just kind of said, "Oh, okay, good way to start it out, Dave. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow." Well, he forgave me, and that kind of went on for the next 14 years. The other part is, we don't know where this music came from in this young man. We don't. We try to go back through the family, and my mom is from the hills of Pennsylvania, and she had a couple of uncles that played the mandolin, a little bit of the fiddle, and those kinds of things, but nothing to this kind of degree. And, certainly neither his mom or myself, I can't even tune the radio, guys. I'm telling you, I'm just that inept. Brad's tried to teach me, and he just tells me, "Stop, Dad. It's just not worth it." But it was very evident early on, even before he went to school, that, he had this rhythm. He'd rock on that rocking horse, and by the time he was in kindergarten, he was into my Neil Diamond albums and singing Sweet Caroline and all kinds of things. And I actually took him to a Neil Diamond concert when he was in first grade, so that's why I was late that next day, Paul. But anyway, but this music thing really enticed him. So his brother was playing saxophone in the band, and we thought, well, he'll just pass it on to him and kind of go from there, and we'll be fine because we already own the saxophone. And he came home and he said, I want to play the violin. We said, violin? There's nobody ever playing. How do you even play the violin, you know? But Bob Phillips, of course, got his attention and took him on from there. He really took a liking to it, to the point that Bob actually pushed him in some different areas in terms of talking about, you know, who some of the great fiddlers were. And just because we were like people sending kids to baseball camps and all those other things, we sent Brad to fiddle camp. And the fiddle camp that we decided to send him to was the Mark O'Connor camp in Tennessee, just outside Nashville. Well, Brad was really excited about that. And for the 6 months prior to that, there was a song that you even hear the fiddlers play sometimes called Bola Bula. And at the end, there is an incredible piece that is very difficult. And Brad was bound and determined that he was going to learn that and play that for Mark O'Connor. So every night, we all heard Bola Bula, okay? And when we got to camp, we went after the first day and went up to Mark, and Mark was in like the shelter area with some other kids, and I said, you know, Brad's been practicing this, he'd like to play that for you. He goes, okay, we will in a minute. And he was talking to a couple of kids, and when he's done with those, he says, okay, it's dinner time. And probably my one time where I really stepped in and said, wait a minute, buddy. I said, this kid's been playing 6 months this thing, and I've been listening to it for 6 months. You're going to hear this kid's song. And Brad played it for him, and he was very impressed. Well, the fate and story goes on that for the next 3 years, Brad went back to that camp, and for the next several years, even to most recently, he taught at the camps and the conferences that Mark O'Connor put on, let alone going to the Prague across the ocean there for the University of Michigan and teaching as well. So teaching is also a big part of his thing too. You know, I wish I had as much drive as he has. His passion for music is incredible. He went on and decided to challenge himself even more, challenge his teachers. When he was in the 7th grade, I believe it was, that he went with a couple of high school kids named Amy Feldkamp and another inductee, Bryn O'Malley, and they created this little group called the Fiddlers 3, and they hired themselves out for gigs, and that was a pretty special thing, and he hung right in there with them. Well, 7th grade with 2 high school girls is probably not such a difficult thing anyway, but, you know, he played. And then things kind of went from there. You know, he hooked up and played with Milish, which is a kind of a Celtic, but really progressive Celtic kind of group that he played for many, many years. Finished his degree at the University of Michigan, and then continued on doing some things that he's doing more recently. He is now producing Jeff Daniels' 3rd CD. He's been on stage with Aretha Franklin, twice with Stevie Wonder, Iggy Pop, whoever that is, and several other things. I watched him take the stage with Natalie McMaster, who's just a fabulous Celtic Cape Breton fiddler too. It's been a great ride. It's been great listening to him practice all these years, and with great pride from his family, his immediate family, his wife Kate, his daughters Evelyn and Allie, and his son Will, his brother Brian, and his mom Denise. We want to congratulate you, son, on the inductee to the Saline Hall of Fame.
Thanks, Chad. Well, he just did the whole first half of my speech. So let me find a starting place here. I think I'll start, of course, by saying thank you to everyone for nominating me and getting me involved here and being a part of the Hall of Fame. You know, most people have come to know me through my musical achievements, but before music was part of my life, there was this entirely different focus. I had no plan to be a musician, really, until the day I saw the Saline Fiddlers in the cafeteria over at Pleasant Ridge, and I remember thinking, well, maybe I'll try that. That looks fun, you know. And I remember getting the violin in my hands and It felt good. Like my grandfather talks about, he was a sheet metal worker in Detroit for 60 years or something, and he talks about how a hammer felt good in his hand, and the violin felt good in my hands. And it just made sense to me, and everything just felt right. And so from there was no turning back. But before that, there was really only one other thing, and that was Saline Hornet football. Now I'm going to try and pick up here where I started writing this. As I mentioned before, I wasn't always involved in music. Before music was even on my radar, there was what now feels like a whole other lifetime. I don't often think about it, but when I do, waves of nostalgia wash over me. And today, it feels like the right time to maybe reflect on some of those memories. Before I played the violin, I had 3 life goals, and my family will probably remember these. First goal was to be a Saline Hornet football player. Second one was to one day be big enough to help my dad work on a car. And the third one was to be just as famous as my dad. And growing up, it was normal to be out around town and hear people refer to my dad as Coach Phillips. In fact, that still happens to this day. People were always excited to talk to him about Saline football, and through the eyes of a young kid, I marveled at his ability to interact with people. He was always so charismatic and energetic and smart and witty and creative, and was he ever funny? People were always drawn to his energy. They looked up to him with great admiration, and I myself admired him for that. The names I would hear around the dinner table were and still are legends in my mind. Jack, Ed, Clem, Paul, and our neighbor down the street, Sipple. Even the names of some of the players on the teams were legendary to my brother and I, names that he and I now refer to as Saline classics. Reeves, Boyven, Palmieri, Tyson, Fanning, Musson, Comfort, and of course, Ellis and Raft. I could go on and on about those days. So many great stories rooted in the culture of Saline. Football picnics at Mill Pond and coaches' family gatherings out at the Gall's house. And the smell of popcorn and hot cider on Friday night football games. And of course, I can't forget to mention one of my proudest achievements before music was even a thing for me. A 6 consecutive year run as the ball boy for the varsity football team. I'm really proud of that. Something feels backwards standing here receiving this honor today. See, what I'm getting at here is, besides Neil Diamond and Anne Murray and Michael Jackson, my dad was the most famous person I could possibly imagine when I was growing up. This entire experience has been such a full circle temporal shift. It is indeed an honor to be listed among some of those legendary names in the Hall of Fame here. But to me, there's one name that is missing. My dad worked here in Saline for 14 years, during which time he served as a football coach, baseball coach, marketing teacher, co-op coordinator, special populations director, and on the Saline 2000 design team. Along with Coach Crabtree, Coach Gall, and the rest of the Saline football coaches, he helped lead the football program to what is arguably the golden era of the Saline football during the mid to late 1980s. As part of his marketing curriculum, he also founded the school store, then called This and That, or TNT, which still functions today. I think they renamed it though. It's unacceptable. He left Saline in the fall of 1992 to pursue opportunities as an administrator in other districts, but later to return to serve on the Saline School Board. During his time on the board, he played a significant role in the design and planning for this magnificent building we're standing in today. Many of his former students and players are now teachers and administrators in this district, including Scott Graydon, Dave Raft, Kurt Ellis, Scott Tyson, Kevin Musson, and others. I'm not sure if being in the Hall of Fame qualifies me to nominate anybody, but if so, consider this my unofficial nomination for my dad, Coach Dave Phillips, to rightfully become a part of the Foundation for Saline Area Schools Hall of Fame. His impact on this community is monumental, and he's the most famous person I've ever known. Thank you again to the foundation for this tremendous honor. I'd like to close by saying that the Saline community at large has one overarching quality that makes it special. It sets it apart from other districts. An unstoppable prioritization and a high value of strong community. Whether you're part of music or sports, the one thing that makes all the greatness that has come out of this town possible is the strong sense of community that thrives here. And I'm proud to have benefited from the efforts of all those who came before me. Thank you.
Our sixth inductee here this evening is Russ Ernest. When I called Russ to tell him that he had been nominated and was going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, I also shared with him as a student at Union, he was by far the most sought-after sixth grade teacher, and unfortunately I drew the short end of the stick, so I didn't get the opportunity to be in his class. But I am happy to be able to introduce him tonight as part of the Hall of Fame. To formally introduce him, though, is Karen Devine. So Karen, come on up.
Good evening. I have the honor of being here tonight to introduce to you someone who I was lucky enough to team with and to learn from for 13 years. He's a mentor, a friend, an outstanding person and educator. In the classroom, he was always kind and caring towards the kids. His style was quiet and calm. The kids learned quickly that he was there for them and that he really cared. He had a unique way of getting the kids to want to work beyond what was just enough and to truly challenge themselves to do more and to learn more. Together we did many projects and activities, lots of trips to Toronto and Niagara Falls. He was even brave enough to plan after-school field trips where we planned an end-of-the-year party, and we took 60 kids to my house every year and let them go kayaking and have water balloon fights. Not only did he influence the life of many students for 38 years in the classroom, he also coached for 29 seasons. His influence on the many students he inspired and the staff and community members that were fortunate to have worked with him, ladies and gentlemen, is with great honor that I present to you Mr. Russ Ernest.
Thanks, Karen. I want to start out by thanking the foundation for this great banquet and the great evening we had last night at the football game. I want to sidetrack here for a second. Don't know if you guys realize it, but there have been 3 Hall of Fame ceremonies this past summer. We had the Major League Baseball in June and National Football League in August, and National Basketball Association just a few weeks ago. So I think the foundation did a great job in planning that a few weeks after that we can end up this entire Hall of Fame season with this banquet. Good job, guys. In listening to some of the speeches that the pro players gave, I really couldn't help but notice that a lot of what they had to say at least correlated with what I was going to say. And in listening to everyone tonight, certainly what they had to say as well. Most every player indicated that he could not have succeeded without the help of a lot of other people, the guidance, not only in their life, but in their career. And I felt the same way, and as we listened to people tonight, certainly every teacher, every administrator, everybody who works for a district has the help, support, and guidance of many people to be successful. The parallel between these players and those receiving the honor tonight is really remarkable. We may not have the fame of a professional player, but certainly without the help and guidance, we would not be here tonight. As I stand here tonight, I do want to say that I accept this honor along with many, many other people who could stand beside me, because without them I would not be here. Preparing for tonight, I was trying to think, okay, do I start naming a lot of people? But Kurt told me that I had, a limited amount of time, and I knew we wanted to be home sometime tonight, or at least before tomorrow morning. So I really kind of broke it into 3 groups of people that I really want to thank, and then a few individuals. First group I'd like to thank a lot would be my family. Starting out in 1974 as any new teacher, and I think those here that are teachers know that, we really are kind of on our own, and we really have to fly by the seat of our pants sometimes to figure out what to do in not only teaching the kids, but how to deal with the kids. And when you need to talk to someone about this and try to, get some advice and so on, sometimes the only person you can do that with is at home. It was kind of unique that during my first year here in Saline, I also got married during that first year before the school year ended. And I'm sure my wife didn't realize, but I kind of put in the wedding vows there that we are going to honor and love and cherish, and then I wrote in there, and you have to listen to your husband come home and talk about his job every night until you get really tired of it. And she was starting her own career, since we were just both newly out of college and newly married, but she listened, she supported, she gave advice, guidance, and to start my career and all through the 38 years I taught, she was there by my side. When I started coaching and the evenings became till 10 or 11 o'clock at night on game nights, she was the one that basically raised the family and took care of things there so I could do that. And for that, I would never have been able to succeed without her guidance, help, and support. The second group I really need to recognize would be the colleagues with whom I taught. And included in that would be a lot of support staff, naming kitchen staff, custodial staff, secretarial staff. If you're a teacher, you know that you do not make it in your career unless you have those people there helping and supporting you each and every day. Also, I'd like to thank the fellow teachers that I had. I was very fortunate that when I started the 6th grade level, that there was about a core group of a half a dozen of us who taught together for over 25 years. So we kind of grew together professionally and personally, and many of them are still very close friends of mine. During the last 13 years, as Karen just mentioned, I did have the privilege of teaching with her. I have to indicate that they were probably the best years of my teaching career. She was a new teacher at the time, had only taught 1 year before we started to become a partner. But getting together and planning activities for the kids in class and doing something rather unique, and that's planning a lot of activities after school where parents went with us in order to do this and drive the kids, really made, I think, those years something to remember. And when I made my decision to retire, I felt, there's no better way to go out but on top. And I owe a lot of that to Karen. The other group of colleagues I'd like to thank, of course, were all the administrators. I kind of sat back and tried to think over the 36 years I was here who were my building principals and assistant principals. And this was quite a number. I actually worked with 10 different building principals in 36 years and 2 assistant principals. I don't know, and everyone who's here tonight, I know Steve Lotch, you are here. He's certainly one of the building administrators I worked with. I don't know that anyone else is here. Oh, Dave Rapp, you're here. You were an assistant. The thing I really want to mention is that their help, their support, their encouragement was just fantastic. A lot of what I did, they said, try it, do it. They were enthusiastic about it, and much of the success I had certainly came because of that support. The last group I would really like to mention would be all the young people that I really had the fortune of teaching and coaching. As a matter of fact, I was going to name them because there weren't too many around here, and then I started seeing more and more of them show up. So what I really would like to do, really, there's not many, could those people that I had the great fortune of teaching or coaching kind of just stand up for me so I can see everyone who's here? Kind of gives you an idea that it all comes back. To me, having the students be really the focal point of your career is number one. And it's kind of funny that when I started, just before I started teaching, and I was in college, I had a professor give me a quote from Albert Einstein, so that's the second one we get to hear tonight. And it's kind of a strange quote, and it says that education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned in school. Now you can imagine a teacher sitting, or a prospective teacher sitting in class thinking, okay, so that means I'm going to go in and basically accomplish nothing. But he added on that, he said, when you figure out what that means, you will be successful and you will have a most enjoyable career. And fortunately, it didn't take me 36 years to figure it out. I had a great supporting teacher when I student taught, and that was, well, quite a while ago, in the 1970s. He was way ahead of his time, and during that year, I did learn really what that quote meant. And it kind of meant basically that classes need to be treated as a family. That academics weren't number one, that learning respect, responsibility, organization, hard work, that was something that was going to be a lifelong skill long after kids would forget about the knowledge that you were trying to teach them. And because I did that and told the kids, you know, you're going to spend as much of your waking hours in class as you will anyplace else, this is going to be a family. And I think we grew close in every year we did that. And because of that, I think the kids enriched my life, hopefully as much as I did theirs. Again, I am grateful to have been selected for this honor. To me, it's a collective effort and a collective honor, for without the friends, family, colleagues, parents, and especially the students that I not only taught but coached, I would not be standing here tonight, and for that, I thank you.
Our seventh and final inductee here tonight came home to Saline all the way back from Florida about a week ago. And so it's been great to be able to catch up with her a little bit, but Elizabeth Moore will be introduced by her daughter, Amy. Sorry.
Tonight, I have the privilege of introducing Elizabeth Moore. On various occasions tonight, I already told Mr. Corona, Uncle Paul, and Raft that my introduction was only a short 20 minutes, so you guys can just lean back and enjoy. In all seriousness, it's been an honor. It's an honor to represent my dad, my brother, my sister, as we celebrate this entire class of very well-deserving 2016 Hall of Fame inductees, and most specifically, Mrs. Moore. You see, all three of us called her Mrs. Moore because she was not only our mom, but also our teacher. I laugh when she talks about how hard it must have been for us to have our mom as a teacher. But I can assure you, we have a much better appreciation for how hard it must have been to have us, not only as kids, but also as students. I'm not going to go over the list of accomplishments that my mom accumulated throughout her esteemed career, as we would be here far too long, but I am going to share with you the following. Elizabeth Moore genuinely cared for each and every one of her students, and all of us were better because she was our teacher. She respected her colleagues, and the camaraderie she fostered created unbelievable friendships and relationships that went well beyond work hours. She devoted her time, energy, and equity into Saline area schools, and there's no doubt in my mind that her legacy will be what she instilled in the thousands of students whose lives she enhanced for the better. As wonderful as it was for so many to experience being taught math by Mrs. Moore, I can assure you that the luckiest people are my brother, sister, and I. Not only were we able to on occasion call her Mrs. Moore, but we get to always call her Mom. On behalf of my dad, my siblings, and the rest of our family back home, including her grandkids, Allender, Holden, Hayden, Elizabeth, and the soon-to-be John, who we will call Jack, it's my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Elizabeth Moore.
Good evening. I'd like to congratulate the class of 2016, all of the inductees, and I'd like to say how pleased I am to see so many of the former inductees here tonight. That is wonderful. John and I moved to Saline in 1971 after he took a job at Ford Motor Company. I asked my friend Sally Grieve, who's here with me tonight, to do me a favor. I needed a list of all the school districts within 25 miles so that I could submit my resume to teach math. She told me she'd be happy to, but she wouldn't list Saline because everybody wanted to teach at Saline and I wouldn't get a job there. So that's how it started. I would like to recognize a few individuals who have helped me along this journey. First, I will thank two people for giving me the opportunity to teach in Saline. They are the superintendent of when I was hired, the late Harold Hintz, and Paul Tebow, my first principal, who I had the privilege of working with for my first 25 years. Thanks so much, Paul. I began teaching at Saline High when the current middle school had just been completed. I taught at the high school until 2001. And I even taught 2 classes at the middle school for 13 years. John had always said that he would work 30 years at Ford, and then he was retiring. He wasn't kidding. And in 2001, I knew that he would retire in May. I wasn't really ready to retire, but I knew that he intended to spend some of the winter months in Florida, as he always hated the 4-letter word that fell in the winter. I remember an evening in February of 2001 when John and I were attending a Hornet basketball game, and John was talking to the principal, Joe Rossi. Joe told him that he didn't really think that Liz was ready to retire yet. John didn't skip a beat. He told Joe that it was okay if she continued teaching because they had direct deposit in the Florida banks. I will never forget the look on Joe's face. I finally did decide to retire that year, as I knew John was going to go to Florida in the winter. I didn't know how to use the snowblower, and I wasn't interested in learning. I was fortunate for the next 4 or 5 years to do many long-term sub-jobs, so I had the best of both worlds. Besides teaching math, I was involved in many other things at the high school, one of which was honor roll and honor roll awards. I started this in 1975, and I was still managing it until a couple of years ago. In March, Kurt sent me an email to give him a call. I thought it strange that he was calling me Mrs. Moore instead of Liz, and I wondered what he could possibly want. But I was sure that I didn't want to go back to doing the honor roll and honor roll awards. To my surprise, he told me that I had been selected for the Saline Foundation Hall of Fame. It was one of the nicest phone calls I've ever received. And I really felt badly afterwards that I wondered what he wanted me to do. Thank you, Kurt, and all the other individuals who made it possible for me to receive this honor. I wish them all the luck in the years to come, because there are so many deserving individuals. I would be remiss today if I didn't thank 4 very important people: my husband, John, and our 3 children, Amy, Scott, and Kelly. I was so pleased when each one of them, without my asking, I might add, said that they would be happy to come back to Michigan to be with me tonight. I'm sure it's not easy to grow up in the system in which your parent works. We have many kids in Saline who experience this during their years, and that's because we as parents want them in this system. It might even be worse for my kids, because if you're ready for a course that's only taught by your mom, then that's what happens. On top of that, one of my kids had me as a class sponsor, and all 3 of them had me as their National Honor Society sponsor. Although I'm not sure how they really felt about all of this, I can't thank them enough for not complaining. Lastly, I thank John for being willing to build a float, work in the concession stand, and especially not to complain when I said that I had to grade papers. I'm sure you've all heard the remark that it takes a village to raise a child, and I believe that parents are the most important part. I was always thankful that Saline had so many parents who cared deeply about their children. They form a wonderful foundation that administrators, teachers, coaches, and the entire community can use to help form responsible citizens. I enjoyed teaching students and making sure that they knew that I cared about them, but at the same time, they knew what I expected. My students are the last group that I would like to recognize. They are the reason I became a teacher and loved what I did for over 30 years. It was always a remarkable feeling when I would hear that one of my former students had become a math teacher. And like this honor today, that's the ultimate honor. Thank you very much.
As you can imagine, the Alumni Committee is absolutely thrilled with this 3rd Hall of Fame class. Just as these individuals form the foundation for Saline area schools and the community of Saline, they also continue to form the foundation of the Foundation for Saline Area Schools Hall of Fame. In the coming months, we will begin accepting applications for nominations for the 2017 class. We'll start that in January, and we now have 21 excellent examples of the types of quality individuals we are looking for. Plaques honoring these 7 individuals are now displayed in the hallway on your way out the door. I would ask before we go tonight, as soon as we wrap up here, I would ask all 7 Hall of Fame inductees this year to please make their way down there so that we can get pictures with you in front of the wall. On behalf of the Foundation for Saline Area Schools, I congratulate our newly enshrined Hall of Fame members. I thank you for your attendance, and I really wish you well. I hope to see everybody here again next year. Thank you very much.